This pipeline is happening, whether you like it or not. Now get back to your homes before I make you.
He nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate in his chest. The land, the river, the barn, the orchard, and the trees, they were no longer obstacles or tests. They were companions, teachers, and partners in the life he had sought. The quietest woman stepped forward, her eyes glinting with quiet pride. "And you will continue to learn," she said softly, "because the valley never stops teaching, and those who belong to it never stop listening." Over the following days, the man worked alongside the three women, no longer in fear or confusion, but in harmony with the valley's rhythms. He repaired the barn completely, planted new crops, tended the orchard, and learned to read the river's moods. The three women shared their knowledge freely, each in their own way. The tallest taught him strength and presence. The middle taught him wisdom and attention to detail. And the quietest taught him patience and intuition. The farm began to flourish as never before. The soil responding to his careful labor and respect. Seeds sprouted quickly. The orchard's fruit ripened with unusual vigor. And the river seemed to shimmer more brightly, as if acknowledging the harmony restored. Neighbors from the distant town whispered about the man who had tamed the valley's land. But few knew the truth behind his success, the guidance of the three giants who had chosen him, and the valley itself, alive and aware. As the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, the man sat with the three women near the riverbank. The water reflected the colors above, dancing with the evening light. He felt a deep sense of belonging, a quiet happiness that had eluded him for so long. "You have done more than survive," said the tallest woman, her voice gentle now, no longer sharp or commanding. "You have proven that you can listen, adapt, and respect. That is why the valley accepts you." The middle woman smiled, her hands tracing the outlines of the orchard trees. "And the valley will continue to teach you," she said. "Every day will bring a lesson, every season a challenge. But now you are ready to meet them with understanding, not fear." The quietest woman finally spoke fully, stepping closer to the water. "The valley holds many secrets," she said softly. "Some you may never fully know. But what matters is that you live in harmony with it, that you respect it, and that you continue to grow alongside it. That is the way of the valley, and now of you as well." The man felt a warmth in his chest, a mix of pride and peace. He thought back to the journey that had brought him here, the long ride across the plains, the discovery of the cheapest farm in the valley, and the fear and uncertainty he had faced when first meeting the three women. He realized now that all of it had been necessary, all of it part of the valley's plan to prepare him for this moment. He looked at the three women, feeling gratitude deeper than words could express. They had challenged him, guided him, and allowed him to prove himself. They had shared the valley with him not as rulers or owners, but as partners in a living, breathing world that demanded respect and understanding. The farm thrived in the weeks that followed. Crops grew tall and healthy, the orchard bore fruit richer than he had ever seen, and the river continued to guide and sustain the land. He worked alongside the three women, not as a student but as a peer, fully accepted into the rhythms and mysteries of the valley at night. He would sit by the fire, watching the stars reflected in the river's surface, feeling the valley around him like a living presence. He knew that challenges would always come, that seasons would change and trials would return. But he also knew that he had the strength, knowledge, and respect to face them. The valley, once a place of fear and uncertainty, had become a home, a sanctuary, and a source of purpose he had never imagined. And so, the man who had bought the cheapest farm in the valley found something far greater than property or wealth. He found belonging, growth, and a partnership with forces larger than himself. The three women remained by his side, guiding, watching, and teaching, yet never stifling. The valley thrived under their combined care, and he thrived as part of it, strong, wise, and at peace. The sun rose each day, casting golden light across the barn, the orchard, and the river, reminding him of the journey he had taken. The land, once a test and a mystery, had become a place of harmony and promise. The man understood finally that happiness was not found in escape or solitude, but in connection to the land, to those who guide it, and to the rhythms of life that demand respect, patience, and courage. And so, in the heart of the valley, beneath the watchful eyes of the three women, the man who had once sought only a cheap farm found a home, a purpose, and a life full of wonder, challenge, and peace. The valley, alive and eternal, had welcomed him, and he had risen to meet it fully, ending the long journey not with fear or struggle, but with harmony and hope. The farm thrived, the river sang, and the valley whispered its secrets in quiet approval. The man smiled, feeling the warmth of a future built on respect, courage, and understanding. And for the first time in his life, he knew that he truly belonged. The story now ends with the man fully integrated into the valley, having learned from the three guardians and achieving a satisfying, hopeful conclusion while keeping suspense, growth, and the old American setting intact. The river seemed to respond, the currents shifting and the shadow beneath breaking apart into streams of light and darkness. The box pulsed in his hands, and he realized it was connected to the movement of the water, almost like a key to unlocking what lay hidden. Slowly, he followed the currents, feeling the pulse of the land through his fingers. Listening to the rhythm beneath his feet, time became strange. The sun shifted imperceptibly as he moved. Yet the forest and river seemed unchanged, frozen in a moment that stretched endlessly. He felt exhaustion creeping in, the ache in his muscles deepening, yet he could not stop. He was being tested not only for skill and strength, but for endurance and focus. Every thought, every breath, every heartbeat mattered in the valley's assessment. Suddenly, a surge of water rose before him, forming a wall that threatened to sweep him off his feet. His heart raced, panic clawing at his chest. But then he remembered the quietest woman's words, "Listen not only with your ears, but with your heart." He paused, centering himself, feeling the flow of the river rather than fighting it. Slowly, the water seemed to accept his presence, bending around him instead of against him. Guiding him forward, he reached a bend in the river where the water slowed into a shallow pool. At its center lay a formation of rocks that glimmered faintly, carved with symbols matching the box and tools. He placed the box atop the stones, and immediately the river seemed to respond, ripples racing outward, as if acknowledging completion of a ritual. The roots beneath the surface shifted, creating pathways that led him back toward the edge. The current now gentle and guiding, rather than aggressive, exiting the water. Soaked and trembling, he looked toward the three women. The tallest woman's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. The middle woman's hands hovered over the orchard trees, sensing the balance restored to the valley. And the quietest woman, standing by the riverbank, allowed the faintest nod. An acknowledgement of the trial completed. Even so, there was no relief. The valley was far from tamed, and he understood that he had only passed one part of a greater challenge. The box, the tools, the river, and the shadows in the forest were all pieces of a puzzle that was still incomplete. He had glimpsed the power of the land and its guardians, and he knew that the true test would require more than courage. It would demand wisdom, patience, and heart. That night, the fire in the barn burned brighter, crackling and sending sparks into the dark sky. The man sat close, hands wrapped around a mug of steaming water, feeling the weight of all he had experienced pressing down upon him. Every sound outside, the rush of the river, the whisper of the trees, the distant calls of birds and creatures reminded him that he was never alone. The valley watched, the women watched, and the land waited for him to prove his place. In the middle of the night, a sudden noise startled him, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from the earth itself. He rose, heart hammering, and stepped outside. The stars were bright, and the valley stretched out in shadowed waves of hills and forest. In the distance, he could see the three women, standing apart yet together, their silhouettes towering against the sky. They were waiting. He realized then that the valley's trials were not only about the land, or the river, or the barn. They were about him. About his ability to endure, to learn, to adapt. and to rise to the demands of a world that was alive, mysterious, and unforgiving. The thought both terrified and thrilled him. He had traveled far, seeking a simple life, yet the valley offered him something far greater, a chance to become part of something eternal, something that had existed long before him and would exist long after. The first light of dawn spread across the horizon. Golden and trembling, the man prepared for another day, knowing that each challenge brought him closer to understanding, closer to earning the trust of the three women, and closer to claiming a place in the valley he had dared to enter. But he also knew that the greatest challenge was yet to come, a confrontation with the land and its guardians that would test everything he had learned in every part of himself. The air was thick with anticipation, the valley holding its breath. The three women moved like shadows through the trees and fields, their presence both comforting and formidable. The man tightened his hands around his tools, muscles coiled, heart steady. The land awaited his next steps, and he understood, finally, that he could not retreat. Not now, not ever. The valley had chosen him, and he would face whatever came, knowing that only courage, respect, and understanding could guide him through the final trials that lay ahead. The wind stirred through the orchard, carrying a faint scent of wildflowers and damp earth, and the man felt a shiver of anticipation. The final test was near, the climax of his journey through the valley that had already changed him in ways he could not fully describe. Shadows shifted, the river gleamed in the distance, and the tallest woman's eyes seemed to hold the promise of revelation and challenge all at once. He took a deep breath, looking toward the horizon where light and shadow met, knowing that the valley's true secrets were just beyond his reach. The farm, the river, the forest, and the three giants were all pieces of a living puzzle, and he was at the center of it. Every choice, every movement, every thought mattered now more than ever. And somewhere deep in the valley, the land seemed to pulse with expectation, as if it were aware that the moment of reckoning was almost upon him and that the path to hope, triumph, and perhaps happiness lay just beyond the next trial. The first light of dawn spilled across the valley, soft and golden, chasing away the shadows that had stretched long through the night. The man rose from the barn, his muscles sore but steady, the memory of the river's trial still pulsing through him. He knew today would bring the final test, the moment when everything he had endured and learned would be measured against the valley itself. He stepped outside, boots crunching on frost-kissed grass, and saw the three women waiting at the edge of the orchard, their silhouettes framed by the rising sun. The tallest woman approached first, her steps quiet but commanding. "You have come far," she said, her voice calm, yet carrying the weight of authority. "The valley has tested your strength, your patience, and your heart. But the final step is not in labor or endurance, it is in understanding." Reflecting 1,000 shades of green and gold. "Go. The river will show you what must be done." The middle woman handed him the carved box from the previous day. "This is the heart of the valley's memory," she said. "Within it is the story of those who came before and the promise of those who remain. Open it when you reach the river's bend and you will see the path clearly. But remember, the valley's guidance only helps those who listen with respect." The quietest woman remained near the orchard trees, her eyes following him as he moved toward the water. She finally spoke softly, almost a whisper carried by the wind. "The valley's final truth will not frighten those who are ready. Be ready." Stepping into the river, he felt the familiar pulse beneath his feet, the water urging him onward, twisting and turning in ways that challenged his balance and resolve. The currents pushed, pulled, and threatened to unseat him. But he remembered the lessons the three women had imparted: patience, observation, and respect for the land. The river responded as he moved, parting slightly to guide him toward a bend where the sunlight touched the water in a golden blaze. There, on a flat stone at the center of the pool, lay another carved object, a key, simple in shape, but radiating the same mysterious energy as the box. Kneeling carefully, he placed the box beside the stone, then opened it. Inside were symbols and instructions, not in any language he recognized, yet somehow clear in meaning. He lifted the key and felt the pulse of the valley sync with his own heartbeat. In that moment, everything clicked. the purpose of the trials, the reason for the women, and the way the land had tested him all along. The river shifted suddenly, rushing faster and forming a sparkling arc above him, almost like a bridge of light. He stepped onto it, feeling the current's power beneath him, but trusting it, letting it carry him gently to the opposite bank. There, the three women waited, watching silently. The tallest woman's eyes held approval. The middle woman's hands rested lightly on the orchard's oldest tree, and the quietest woman finally smiled. Faint, but unmistakable. "You have listened," said the tallest woman. "You have acted with courage, patience, and respect. The valley recognizes you now, and it has chosen to accept you as part of its story." He felt an overwhelming sense of relief and wonder, as if a weight that had pressed on his shoulders for months had finally lifted. Yet there was no arrogance in his triumph, only gratitude and understanding. The valley was alive, yes, and powerful beyond measure, but it was not cruel. It had demanded his best self, and he had risen to meet it. The middle woman approached him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "The farm is yours," she said. "Not in the sense of ownership by paper or coin, but in a deeper way. You belong here as part of this valley. The work you do, the care you give, and the respect you show will maintain the balance." By the time he returned to the edge of the orchard, the sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows across the valley. The tallest woman was waiting, her expression unreadable. He held out the box, heart racing. She took it without a word, her fingers brushing his briefly, sending a shiver down his spine. "You have done well," she said finally, "but this is only the beginning. The valley has many secrets, and each will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine." He felt a surge of relief, quickly replaced by unease. If retrieving a box from a river was considered a trial, what other challenges lay ahead? He glanced toward the middle woman, who was tending to the orchard trees with quiet precision. Her movements were methodical, almost ritualistic, and he realized she was doing more than pruning. She was reading the land, understanding it in ways he had never considered. The quietest woman remained at the river, watching the water flow with a steady gaze. He sensed her thoughts were far from him, as though she were communicating silently with the valley itself. The presence of all three women pressed upon him, representing a different aspect of the land's strength, wisdom, and vigilance. As evening fell, he returned to the barn, exhausted but determined. He lit a fire and began to clean the tools he had used that day, each movement deliberate. The valley around him seemed to hold its breath, the wind whispering through the trees, the crows calling from unseen perches. He knew he could not falter. Every action he took was observed, judged, and recorded in ways he could not see. Night deepened, and sleep finally claimed him, but his dreams were restless. He saw the three women moving through the valley like shadows, their eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. The river surged and receded in impossible patterns, and the carved box from the river pulsed with a strange energy. In his dreams, the land spoke to him in whispers he could not fully understand, promising both reward and peril. Morning came with a sharp chill. The man rose, feeling the weight of anticipation and uncertainty pressing on him. He knew that each day in the valley would bring new tests, and that the three women were not simply guardians. They were keepers of a world he was only beginning to glimpse. The tallest woman approached him first, her boots silent against the grass. "Today," she said, "you will work the fields. But the soil itself will not yield without respect. You must understand its rhythms, its moods, and its secrets. The valley responds to intent, not strength." He followed her instructions, planting seeds in straight rows, listening to the subtle signs the land gave him. The soil felt heavier than he expected, yet richer, almost aware of his touch. Hours passed in intense labor, each motion deliberate, each breath measured. He realized that farming here was not just work. It was a conversation with the land, a negotiation with forces he did not fully understand. By mid-afternoon, he noticed something unusual in one corner of the field. The ground seemed disturbed, as though something had moved beneath it. He knelt down, brushing away the soil, and uncovered another small object, a smooth stone carved with intricate patterns. It pulsed faintly, like the box from the river. "Ah!" and he felt the valley's gaze upon him again. He brought it to the tallest woman, who examined it silently. "You are noticing what others do not," she said finally. "This is a sign that the valley is beginning to trust you, but trust is fragile. One misstep, one act of arrogance, and it will withdraw its favor entirely." The middle woman approached, her hands brushing the orchard trees, as if seeking counsel from their roots. "You are learning quickly," she said. "But learning is not enough. You must adapt. The valley changes with the seasons, with the wind, with the movements of the river. What you see now may not exist tomorrow. You must be vigilant." The quietest woman remained near the river, her eyes following the currents, as if reading the water's mind. "Tomorrow," she said finally, without moving closer, "the valley will speak again. Listen carefully. It may not speak in words." As dusk fell, the man felt both pride and unease. He had completed the first trials, yet he knew that the valley's challenges were far from over. He had glimpsed the depth of its power, the mystery of the three women, and the sense that every action carried consequences beyond his understanding. The night was restless once more. The river's voice seemed louder, the wind sharper, the shadows longer. In the darkness, he could hear movement beyond the barn, the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, the whisper of voices carried on the wind. He sensed the valley's secret stirring, watching, waiting for him to rise to the next challenge. He wondered about the lives of the three women, about how they came to hold this land, about the choices that had shaped the valley into the living, breathing place it had become. Each had a presence that filled the space without effort, a strength that could not be measured by height or muscle, a wisdom that seemed to come from centuries of understanding the earth, its rhythms. He realized that surviving in the valley would require more than hard work. It would require humility, courage, and an unspoken bond with the land and its guardians. Every day would bring new trials, every action a test of character. And somewhere deep in the shadows, he knew that a greater challenge was waiting, one that would push him beyond the limits of his experience, his strength, and his understanding. The stars filled the night sky, and the man sat by the fire feeling the valley breathe around him. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, only that he could not leave, and that to stay would demand everything he had earned, perhaps more than he thought he could give. The three women watched from their unseen positions, each a guardian, a teacher, and a force of reckoning. The valley held its breath, the land whispered in secrets, and the man knew that the cheapest farm in the valley was far more than a simple piece of property. It was a crucible, and he had only just stepped into its fires. The valley woke in a tense hush, as if it knew the storm of events was nearing. The man rose before dawn, the chill of early morning biting at his hands and face. The barn, the fields, and the orchard were all quiet, yet the air thrummed with anticipation. He had learned much from the three women, the tallest, whose presence carried authority and fire, the middle, whose hands seemed to speak to the trees themselves, and the quietest, whose gaze could pierce the soul like the sharp edge of winter frost. Yet the valley still held secrets that he had not yet uncovered, and he could feel that they were drawing closer. The tallest woman appeared first, standing at the edge of the orchard, like a sentinel of shadow and sunlight. "Today," she said, "you face the valley's final test before understanding can take root. The river has given you its gift, but it demands balance. You must follow its course, confront what you find there, and return without faltering. The river does not forgive hesitation." The man felt a shiver run down his spine. He had faced the river once before, retrieving the carved box, yet that task had been but a whisper compared to what now awaited him. He nodded, setting his jaw with determination. The middle woman followed, handing him a bundle of tools, each marked with carvings that matched those on the box. "These are not ordinary tools," she said. "They will guide you if you allow them to. Listen to the land, not only with your ears, but with your heart." The quietest woman did not speak, only lifting her hand toward the river, a silent reminder that she and the valley itself were always watching. He felt their eyes pressing on him as he began the trek toward the twisting waterway, the forest pressing close around him, shadows lengthening and merging into darkness. The river was alive, more so than he had ever seen it. Its surface rippled unnaturally, reflecting shapes that seemed to move independently of the wind. When he approached, the water seemed to part slightly, as though guiding him to a narrow channel he had never noticed before. Hesitation tugged at him, but he remembered the tallest woman's words. Hesitation was the river's enemy, stepping into the water. He felt the current push against him, strong and insistent. He held the box and tools close, the symbols almost glowing under the shifting sunlight. The river twisted around him, carrying the scent of moss, stone, and something ancient he could not name. He had the sensation of being both watched and tested, every step measured, every heartbeat counted. Then he saw it, a shape moving beneath the water, vast and dark, curling like a shadow of some great beast. His first instinct was to step back, but the river itself seemed to hold him in place, urging him forward. The shape emerged slowly, revealing itself not as an animal, but as a mass of roots and stone, twisting together like a living sculpture. And yet there was a presence within it, a consciousness that watched him as much as he watched it. The man swallowed hard, gripping the tools with both hands. He knew instinctively that he could not fight it in the conventional sense. Strength alone would not win this encounter. He had learned to read the valley, to feel its rhythms. And now he would have to apply that understanding in a way that mattered more than mere survival. He spoke aloud. Words instinctive, asking the river and its guardians for guidance. I am here to serve the valley. I am here to respect its ways. I mean no harm. His voice carried across the water, clear and steady, despite the quiver in his chest. The man swallowed hard, heart hammering, yet he felt a resolve settling inside him. He had faced storms, wild animals, and long treks over rough country, but never anything like this. He had imagined hardships of soil, weather, and toil, but he had never imagined a living, breathing force, guarding a farm, guarding the valley, guarding 3 giants who could crush him with ease if he faltered. Then I stay, he said finally. Tell me what I must do first. The tallest woman lifted a hand, pointing to the barn behind them. The barn has stood for longer than any living memory, she said. It holds secrets of those who came before. Begin there. Clean it. Mend it. Feel its weight. Then you will begin to understand what the valley requires of you. He nodded, turning his horse toward the barn. Its wooden boards groaned under the gentle wind, the roof sagging in uneven angles. The air smelled of old timber, dust, and the faint tang of iron. As he dismounted, the horse snorted and pawed at the ground, uneasy. The man had the sudden sense that he was entering a space that had a memory, a presence, and that even the animals could feel it, as he began to sweep the floor. He noticed small carvings on the beam's symbols he did not recognize, etched deep into the wood. Some were simple, like lines and circles, while others looked almost like faces, distorted but vivid. His hand hovered over one of them, and he felt a strange tingle, as if the wood itself acknowledged his touch. He paused, listening. The valley was quiet now, save for the distant rush of a river and the faint creak of the barn. And yet, in that quiet, he felt the weight of unseen eyes. The women watched from the edge of the field, their presence almost a shadow across the landscape. He could feel the tallest woman's gaze drilling into him, assessing, judging. He wondered if she knew every thought that passed through his mind, every hesitation, every flicker of doubt. The middle woman wandered slowly along the edge of the orchard, hands brushing the branches of ancient apple trees as if drawing wisdom from their roots. The quietest woman remained at the riverbank, her eyes fixed on the water, which glinted silver in the dying light. Night came fast in the valley, faster than he expected. The sun had barely disappeared before the shadows thickened, and the first stars appeared in the wide sky above. The temperature dropped quickly, and he shivered, wishing he had brought more than a thin coat. He built a small fire inside the barn, the flames casting long, trembling shadows on the walls. The carvings seemed to dance in the firelight, strange faces winking and twisting in ways that made him glance over his shoulder. He heard footsteps outside the barn, and his hand went instinctively to the handle of a hammer he had found. but it was only the tallest woman, standing in the doorway. Her hair fell across her shoulders like a dark waterfall, and her eyes reflected the firelight. "You work well," she said simply. "But remember, it is not the work alone that matters. It is how you do it. The valley notices more than you think." He nodded, unsure what to say. "I want to learn," he said. "I want to understand this place." "Then you will learn," she said, stepping back into the darkness. "But learning comes with a price. Sometimes the price is fear. Sometimes it is sacrifice. And sometimes it is patience, more than a man believes he can muster." He sat by the fire long into the night, listening to the sounds of the valley. There were no crickets like in the lowlands he had traveled. Instead, there was a faint rustle, the whisper of wind through trees, and an occasional low call from somewhere in the darkness that he could not place. Sleep did not come easily, and when it did, it was restless, filled with strange dreams of towering figures and rolling hills that shifted beneath his feet. Morning came in a quiet rush of light. The valley glowed gold, and dew covered the grass in sparkling beads. The man rose early, determined to keep the first lessons of the farm. He found the tools left by the previous caretakers, rough but functional, and began repairs on the barn's roof. Every plank he lifted seemed heavier than it should have been, every nail more resistant than expected. Yet he worked steadily, feeling the valley's pulse in his bones, as if the land itself guided his hands. As he worked, he began to notice small, strange details. The orchard trees bore fruit that seemed larger than normal, almost impossibly so. The river's current changed direction subtly at times, creating pockets of calm that appeared as if by design. Shadows in the fields seemed to move against the sun, falling in patterns he could not explain. He realized the women had not exaggerated. This land was alive in ways beyond his understanding by the afternoon. He was exhausted. He leaned against the barn, wiping sweat from his brow, and looked out over the valley. The three women were gone from the edges of his vision, and yet he could feel them everywhere: the sway of grass, the curve of the hills, the whisper of the wind. He knew they were watching, waiting, testing him in ways he could not yet perceive. The quietest woman appeared first, stepping silently from the riverbank. She approached him slowly, her gaze fixed on his work. "You are learning quickly," she said. "But learning is not enough. You must feel the valley in your bones. You must know it as we do, or it will not allow you to stay." He swallowed hard, heart hammering. "I want to," he said. "I do." "Good," she said. "Tomorrow, you will begin a different task. One that requires more than strength. It requires understanding and courage and respect. The valley will show you the way if you listen." As she disappeared back into the trees, he felt a shiver of anticipation and dread. The farm was not just a farm. The valley was not just land. It was alive, and it had chosen him for reasons he could not yet grasp. The three women were its guardians, its rulers, its secret keepers. And somewhere in the shadows of the valley, he felt the first stirrings of a challenge he could not yet name. A test that would demand every ounce of skill, courage, and heart he possessed. The sun began to set again, painting the valley in molten gold. The barn stood repaired enough to shelter him, yet he knew the real work was only beginning. The shadows grew longer, and with them, a sense of waiting, of reckoning. The valley held its breath, the farm hummed with unseen life, and the three giants watched from places unseen. Ready to see what he would do next? He stared out across the valley, the wind in his hair and the weight of the unknown pressing on his shoulders, knowing that the cheapest farm in the valley was far from simple, and that the three women, the giants of the valley, would not allow him a moment's peace until he proved himself worthy. The night deepened, and the man felt both fear and excitement, a strange mixture that tightened his chest and sharpened his senses. Somewhere beyond the hills, unseen yet present, the valley waited for dawn and for the choices he would make when it came. The next morning, the valley awoke with a golden hush, the air crisp and sharp with the scent of pine and wet earth. The man rose before the sun, his muscles stiff from the previous day's work, but his resolve stronger than ever. He knew that the land did not forgive laziness. and the three women had made it clear that they were testing him in ways beyond mere labor. Today, he would begin the tasks that would reveal whether he belonged here or whether he had overstepped by thinking he could tame. The valley, the tallest woman met him at the edge of the orchard. Her eyes as sharp as steel. "The first trial," she said, "is not in the barn, nor in the field. It is in the woods." She pointed toward the dense line of trees that marked the boundary of the valley. "Beyond that line, the land becomes unpredictable. It will not wait for you. It will not forgive mistakes. You must retrieve what belongs to the river before nightfall." He frowned. "What belongs to the river?" The middle woman stepped forward, holding a bundle of reeds in her hand. "The river carries its gifts and its burdens. There is something lost, something that does not belong to you, but which you must bring back. Only then will you understand the balance here. Only then will you begin to see why this land chooses who it allows to remain." The quietest woman, standing slightly apart, simply said, "Do not underestimate the river. It will test your patience, your strength, and your mind. Do not be foolish." The man nodded, feeling a pulse of fear that he had not felt since the long nights riding across the plains. He had faced wild animals and storms, but the valley's challenge felt different, live, conscious, and always watching. He approached the woods cautiously, the sun climbing higher and casting jagged shadows through the trees. Every rustle made him jump. Every crack of a branch sounded like a warning, deep in the woods. The river came into view, winding through the trees like a silver snake. The water moved quickly, dark and restless. At its edge, he could see something tangled among the reeds, shimmering with a faint, unnatural light. He waded carefully, the cold water biting at his boots and stirring his nerves. The closer he got, the more he sensed that this was no ordinary object. It pulsed subtly, like a heartbeat, as though it were alive. He reached in and lifted at a small, carved box, old and heavy. The carvings matched the strange symbols he had seen in the barn. As soon as his fingers touched the surface, the river seemed to grow restless. The water swirled around his legs, and the trees bent slightly, as if whispering warnings. He gritted his teeth and held the box tight, feeling the pull of something unseen, something demanding that he not falter. He had heard the stories about the valley long before he set eyes on it. Tales whispered in dusty saloons and around flickering campfires, of land so fertile it could make a man rich in a season, but cursed with peculiar legends that made most folk turn and ride the other way. The man himself wasn't one to believe in ghost stories or old wives' tales. He was a practical kind of man, with calloused hands, a wide-brimmed hat, and a heart that ached for more than the crowded streets of his town. The idea of owning a farm, any farm, was enough to pull him westward through the endless fields of golden prairie and tangled forests that separated him from the valley he dreamed of. He found it one late afternoon, the sun tipping low behind the distant mountains, painting the valley in a honeyed glow. At first glance, it looked abandoned. The fences were weathered and broken in places. The barn leaned a little too far to the left, and the well creaked when the wind caught it just so. But there was something about the land that felt alive. The soil smelled rich and promising, and the rows of wild grass swayed in a rhythm that whispered of potential. He knew the price before he even asked. It was the cheapest farm in the valley, dirt cheap, and that made him smile. He was ready to make it his own. He imagined mornings tending the fields, evenings sitting by a fire with a warm meal, nights dreaming of a life he had always wanted. But as he rode closer, boots crunching on gravel, a shadow fell across the horizon, and he realized he was not alone. At first, he thought they were travelers, or perhaps a group of lumberjacks from the town beyond the hills. But as the figures emerged from the mist, his mind froze. 3 women stood there, impossibly tall, their presence commanding the entire valley. They were not ordinary by any measure. Their eyes were sharp, almost predatory, and the air around them seemed to hum with quiet authority. Each wore a long dress that brushed the ground, faded but strong, stitched with care and worn from years of life outdoors. Their hair, wild and untamed, flowed like the rivers that cut through the valley below. These were women who belonged to the land, who had carved their place in it with hands stronger than any man could imagine. The man tightened his grip on the reins. trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The stories didn't mention anyone living here, not this. Not giants who walked the earth like shadows of old legends. And yet here they were. And they were looking at him, their expressions unreadable, measuring, judging, as though they already knew the answer to a question he hadn't yet asked. I'm looking to buy this farm, he said finally, his voice carrying across the quiet valley. The words felt absurd, almost childish, in the weight of their gaze. The tallest of the three stepped forward. Her boots crunched on the gravel in a rhythm that seemed to echo in the space between them. You can buy the farm, she said, her voice low but resonant, but you do not own it. That stopped him cold. He blinked, unsure he had heard correctly. What do you mean? We live here, another said, her arms crossed over her chest, her head tilted slightly. We have always lived here. This land answers to us. And now, it answers to you only if it wishes. The words felt like thunder. He had expected a negotiation with a real estate agent or a town clerk. He had expected paperwork, signatures, a handshake. He had not expected this. Not giants who spoke as if the land itself obeyed them, who made him feel small despite the wide-open spaces around him. He tried to reason, to put things in a way a man might understand. Look, I'm serious about this farm. I've got money ready. I can. The tallest woman lifted a hand, and the air seemed to shift around it. Money does not make a master, she said simply. The land decides. And we have decided already. Chill ran down his spine. This wasn't a game, and he was no longer sure he was in the right. He had come seeking opportunity, adventure, and freedom. But he hadn't anticipated a confrontation with forces he didn't understand. The other two women stepped closer, flanking the tallest. Their eyes were steady, unflinching, and the weight of their presence pressed down on him as if the valley itself was alive, aware and watching. For a moment, he considered turning back. He could ride out of the valley, pretend he had never seen the farm, never known the women who owned it. But something in him resisted. He had come too far. He had sacrificed too much, crossed too many miles, and left too many familiar comforts behind. There was a stubborn spark inside him, a hunger for more than mere survival. And it whispered that maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to coexist with these giants. To claim the land without losing himself? Tell me, he said. Lifting his chin and squaring his shoulders, what would it take to live here? To make this farm mine, and still stay on your good side. The tallest woman's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. It is not about sides, she said. It is about respect. About knowing the land and knowing us. Many men have come, thinking they could bend this valley to their will. Few remain, and fewer understand. The wind stirred, rattling the wooden beams of the old barn behind them. Crows circled overhead, their cries harsh and sudden. There was a sense of waiting in the air, as if the valley itself was holding its breath, eager to see the outcome. The man felt the weight of history pressing on him. The farm was cheap, yes, but every cheap thing carries a cost. And now he knew the cost would not be measured in dollars. The middle woman stepped closer, brushing a hand against the wildflowers that clung stubbornly to the edge of the field. If you choose to stay, she said softly, you must understand that this land remembers. It remembers those who treat it lightly, and it remembers those who dare to defy us. Every seed you plant, every tree you fell, every river you cross it, will all speak back. The man swallowed hard, heart hammering in his chest. He had expected simple work, planting crops, mending fences, tending livestock. He had not expected a land that judged him, women who towered like legends, or a valley that seemed alive with silent power. And yet a strange thrill ran through him. There was danger here, yes, but also a promise, one that called to every corner of his restless spirit. The third woman, the quietest of the three, stepped forward, her gaze steady and unwavering. Decide quickly, she said. The sun will set soon, and night in the valley does not forgive hesitation. When he glanced around, the valley stretching wide and golden under the sinking sun, shadows pooling where the hills bent and the rivers curved, he thought of all the men who had spoken of riches and freedom, of the simple life on a farm. He thought of himself, weary but unbroken, and of the life he had left behind. And then he met the eyes of the tallest woman again. The fire there daring him, challenging him, promising something more than he could ever have imagined. A gust of wind swept across the field, carrying the scent of wild flowers and damp earth. The crows cawed again, the sound sharp against the quiet of the valley. The man drew a deep breath, knowing that the choice before him was not just about land or money, it was about courage, about stepping into a world he had never known, and about facing the giants who already claimed it. He did not speak because words were small here. The valley waited. The women waited. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that the cheapest farm in the valley was about to change his life forever. But whether that change would bring fortune, danger, or something even stranger, he could not yet know. The sun touched the horizon, gold spilling into shadow, and the man felt the valley watching him. Ready to see what he would do next, the man stayed on his horse, letting the wind carry the last heat of the sun across his face. The three women did not move, their silhouettes tall and unyielding against the fading light. He felt a strange mixture of fear and determination, an itch in his chest that told him he could not leave now. Not when he had traveled so far and dared so much to reach this place. Finally, he nudged his horse forward a few steps. Keeping his gaze on the tallest woman, "I'll stay," he said, his voice steady, even as his hands shook slightly. "I'll stay and work the land. But I need to know. What is expected of me?" The tallest woman's eyes narrowed slightly, as if she were weighing his words against some secret scale. "Expectations are simple yet heavy," she said. "You must respect the land, respect the water, respect the skies above. You must respect us. This valley is old, and it remembers everything. It will test you in ways you cannot yet see." The middle woman stepped closer, lowering her voice so that the wind would not carry it too far. "We have lived here for decades," she said. "Each of us has claimed a corner of this valley, not with fences or deeds, but with blood, sweat, and understanding. The land listens to us, answers to us, but it will test any new soul that dares to make it their home." The quietest woman, who had said very little since he arrived, finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost musical, yet firm. "If you stay, you will see the valley's truths. Some are beautiful. Some are cruel. Some will frighten you beyond measure. But to leave now, before you understand, would be to cheat yourself of what you might become."